Hello, I am Coco, and for today I will be talking about and analyzing Rome Open City, directed by Roberto Rossellini, which was made in the year 1945. And I'll be talking about the scene called Recreation, which takes place at the end of the movie. Okay, so let me just cue up my presentation. It should be here. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the first thing I will be talking about is props. So and how like the setting is composed. So the room in which Major Bergman walks into is crowded with props, and that's the first thing that I really recognized. Firstly, what really caught my eye was the use of tin, silvery, shiny materials. Like right here, for example, there is like coffee candlestick holders, and it looks very expensive. Right here, there are like very expensive, looking like tin or silvery type jug holders or water holders or liquid holders, doesn't matter. And right here, there is Cupid statue and also armor. I think this was included in the film to bring or to give the sense of lavish and with these German officers and their common room, I guess, and to give the notion that German officers at this time could afford these very expensive, nice things to just have around, and just very decorative stuff, and just to give the sense of wealth. So next I'll be talking about lighting. So the lighting in the scene uses hard light, where the lights emanate like the subjects around them, like here, his face and the cards are bright, but the exterior is a more darkened toned. And it's also coming from a relatively small light source. The only diegetic lighting that I saw was the candle light here and the small lamp throughout the entire room. Yeah, and you can also see how the lighting sources are relatively close to the subjects. Only certain surfaces are reflected. Again, like this man's head, the cards, and then right here, the tip of the piano, the opera here, and his badge and his head, obviously. And again, the exteriors are very darkened toned and sometimes even pitch black. I also think that the dark appeal or the darkened tone of the whole scene was used to give kind of a casual and party type of feel to it. So it's very like relaxing and not more casual feeling to it. Also, the only background setting that I heard was the piano playing by this man. So next to be cinematography, I'll be talking about. So this whole scene is filmed through medium shots. The only shot, as you can see here and here, and also right here, for example, the only shot that wasn't shot through medium shot that I saw was Marina and Ingrid, which was shot with more of a medium close-up shot. I think this was to add a sense of intimacy between the two, in contrast to the rest of the room, where everyone else is doing more casual things, like the people at the card table. I don't have a picture here, that was my bad, but the rest of everyone else is being more casual. And then this closer shot would give a more sense of intimacy and closeness as they are drinking and cuddling on the couch. I think that's why Rossellini decided to use that shot to really accentuate that part of them and a part of the scene in comparison to the rest of the room. So I will be moving on to gender. So again, there's only two women in the scene, Marina and Ingrid. The girls I think the girls are portrayed in more of a submissive and sexual element. They aren't hiding their sexual identities. They're being very touchy with each other. You're very forefront in their displays of affection, and how they're lying on to each other, and drinking is a very sensual, intimate moment. I also see another gender element of this that I saw and noted was a male over female dominance type of thing between Bergman and the girls. I think the fact in which Bergman speaks to practically everyone in the room except for the two women really shows that he was trying to undermine them in a certain way. The way he, like, this is the feeling that I got from this, is where he went and talked to the men sitting at the table and then went straight over to them, picked up a glass, didn't break eye contact with them, just poured it and looked at them as he was walking away. And this is the best screenshot I could get that could kind of show the side eye that he was giving to them as he was walking away. Like, his body was positioned in a one way, but his head was turning to look at them. And to most people, that would be a sign of a kind of a disrespect. And I think that's, he was trying to show his dominance, superiority over them. I also think the only other person he doesn't talk to is the piano person, the piano guy. And he, you would assume that he works for the officers in this room. So he is looking, in that sense, he's looking at the woman as somebody to the status, or what's the word for that? The status, I guess, of somebody who is looking, I'm working for them. Yeah, so that's what I got from that. And then moving on to status, I think it was another prominent element to this scene. One of the obvious notions that I saw was Major Hartman sitting on this very like eccentric, beautiful, throne-esque type of chair, kind of like as a king would sit on his throne, in contrast to everyone else who was sitting in a more casual setting, like other officers sitting at a table and then the two women on the couch. I think that really speaks to his superiority over the rest of people in the room. I also think the placement of the piano man, who would be right here, is basically playing right next to him. And to me, that looked like he was playing mainly for him, as I guess people in olden days would play for like a king or somebody high up. They would do it right next to them because it's playing for them and not for anybody else in the room, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think that really showed the significance of his prominence in the scene, that he will definitely be a higher up character and has that status above other people. Okay, so moving on to dialogue. Oh, my bad. Moving on to dialogue. The main dialogue in this scene is very important, and it's between Major Bergman and Major Hartman. In the scene, they talk about how, or Major Bergman talks about how the priest will eventually give up and start talking under interrogation because Italians are inferior to the superior German race. I think this dialogue starts panning into a more psychological element when they start talking about, when Hartman says that every race wants to be free and how Germans, all they do is kill. And I think that really gives it kind of a more humane element to a German officer, for example. This obviously comes off really wrong to everyone else in the room because that's not a normal thing that a German officer would say. But I think it really speaks highly of his character. However, it kind of contradicts himself when Hartman is the one who kills the priest the next day or executes the priest the next day. He says that drinking helps him forget the atrocities of the world, and helps him think more clearly of the actuality of the impacts that Germany has on the world. And obviously, this would be a paramount of the alcohol speaking. But I think this whole scene symbolically represents a reality versus fantasy. For example, as soon as the scene opens, you can hear Manfredi being tortured, and that's the first thing that you hear when it just starts. And symbolically or definitionally, torture represents intense suffering. And you could compare this to the suffering or torture of every person's lived reality of that time period and of the people that were impacted by Hitler's reign, or SS officers or German officers or anyone who was doing that during the time. However, the lives of those who are inflicting the torture, i.e. the German officers, Hitler, etc., can go about and live normal lives and don't have to worry about being tortured and don't have the worries that, say, Manfredi is and the priest does. The small part in the scene where you can hear being tortured is showing the realities of the people during this time and how many rebels' lives ended. Then Major Bergman steps into a different room, and you see these German officers living very vibrant, lively lives, and they're partying as if they're living in a fantasy world, and very much in ignorance of the actualities of what's going on literally just outside the next door. So I think that is definitely a huge comparison when you come from, reality of Manfredi and the priest being interrogated, and then you step through this one tiny little door, and then everyone's happy, and for the most part happy and drinking and having a good time, and can have lavish things like decorative props and expensive props, and have nice things like a throne like this, and be smoking and like very lavish living, when the rest of the world outside those doors are suffering. So I think this room very much represents a fantasy for everyone in it and anyone who can be in it. So yeah, that is the end of that analysis. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, and I'm gonna try to stop. Okay, thank you.